He had one shirt he saved for interviews, and a resume he'd rewritten until the margins blurred. The sun over Weston Avenue felt heavier than usual, the heat hitting the pavement in waves, the city humming with brakes and air conditioners. Aaron Vitlop walked with his shoulders squared, the paper folded in his hand like a talisman. This meeting at Weston Industries could change the math of his life. Rent that wasn't late, a week not spent catching odd jobs, a steady line between paycheck and peace. He could see it all in his head, the receptionist's nod, the little badge clipped to his lapel, the end of going home at dusk and handing his mother a worried look. Halfway across the crosswalk, the rhythm of the crowd broke. A young woman in a coat too thin for the sun crumpled to the pavement, as if the pavement had reached up and taken her knees. People glanced, stepped, kept going. A cyclist cursed and rode around the heap of legs in a fallen purse. For a second, Aaron considered the interview, the elevator, the lobby, the white noise of suits. But then he was kneeling, palms against warm forearm, searching for a pulse and for any excuse to keep moving. Her name tag had slipped into her pocket. Her phone was already dead. She looked smaller up close, like someone made of glass that you'd swear would hold up until it didn't. He tore a corner of his shirt and soaked it in a paper cup a vendor handed him, then fanned her face and shielded her from the sun with his briefcase. He asked questions she couldn't answer at first, finally a shallow breath, then a shiver, then her eyes blinking hard, as if waking from a dream. A local man called an ambulance. Another woman offered a bottle of water. By the time Aaron helped her to a bench and kept talking to steady her, his phone lit with 3 missed calls from the number he'd saved for the interview. The time on the bench clock read later than the time he had planned. The lobby of the Weston building would already be quiet. He walked into the Weston Industries tower with sand in his shoes and sunlight glancing off the glass, and the receptionist's face had that polite economical sympathy of someone who deals with disruptions like weather. "Interviews wrapped up an hour ago," she said, eyes flicking to her screen. The chair seemed too small. The world kept its elevators and its schedules. There was no official scolding, no cinematic apology from the hiring manager, just a polite, final end. He handed her his resume anyway, because there was nothing left to do but try to leave something behind other than regret. Weeks after the missed shot blurred into months of odd jobs, delivering packages before dawn, stocking shelves until his back ached, repairing a neighbor's fence for cash and canned food. The white shirt grew a faint collar ring. His confidence folded into the pockets of his jacket. He didn't tell the story with anger, only with the slight annoyance of someone who'd been redirected by circumstance.
He didn't regret the hands that had steadied the girl on the pavement, but there were bills, always bills, small paper demands piling next to the kettle. Evenings stretched and folded into one another. He rehearsed interviews he no longer had. He rewrote resumes he no longer believed in. The city kept moving, indifferent but honest. Then the call came on a Tuesday, while he stacked crates behind a cafe. The voice on the other end introduced herself as Celeste Heiner, assistant to Vincent Lane. She said the company had been trying to track him down. It sounded improbable, as if a stray thread had been tugged and something important had begun to unravel. She was precise, professional. A security review, she said, a witness. They had images from a camera near the bus stop, and someone had recognized the way he moved, a detail the witness remembered. Would he come to the office? There was a time for skepticism, a scam, a mistake, but the line that quoted a time and an address sounded like paperwork, like real corridors and polished wood. He told himself to be careful, and then he found himself saying yes. The Western Industries lobby was a cool cave of glass and gray marble. Sunlight fell like a river across the floor. Aaron felt small, like someone who'd shown up wearing the wrong shoes for the night. Celeste was unobtrusive in her efficiency, tablet in hand, voice a calm current that carried him toward a door with his name now written on a schedule under appointment. The office beyond was open to the skyline, floor-to-ceiling windows that turned the city into a living map. Vincent Lane sat behind a desk that was as much about the view as the furniture. Mid-50s, not unkind, with a line at the corner of one eye that suggested both laughter and focus. Harper Lane was there too, seated at the edge of the window light, a scarf draped around her shoulders. Up close, she looked like someone who'd felt the world tilt beneath her, rushed back into life in a way that made her both tired and raw. She hadn't been plotting anything. She hadn't been trying to climb some social ladder. She'd been found on the avenue and taken home and told that the man who'd stayed with her had the sort of quiet patience that didn't ask for a reward. When she looked at Aaron, there was that mild embarrassment people have when they realize someone saved them without drama. When she spoke, she was straightforward about how she hadn't remembered his face at first, but that security and a description from a taxi driver had helped piece it together. Vincent listened while Aaron described a crosswalk and a folding resume and spilled some of the small humiliations that had come after. He didn't offer platitudes. He told Aaron that Western had positions open that were different from the one he'd applied for, roles that required training and could grow into something steady. "We can teach skill," Vincent said, "but not everyone stands where it matters when nobody is watching."
He said the company cared about more than a polished resume. His voice wasn't theatrical. It was a measure of temperance, the sort of thing that made Aaron think of how few times he'd been seen for what he did, not what he claimed. There was a conversation about fit and expectations and the kind of probationary start that matched Aaron's experience. An assistant coordinator role in a small team, mentorship built into the first 6 months, a path towards something permanent if he proved to have the grit to match his instinct. The offer wasn't a magic fix. There was training to do, hours to commit, and learning to be paid for performance rather than promise. Celeste explained benefits, the modest but real considerations that make a life less precarious: weekday payroll, access to health resources, a transit stipend. Harper apologized softly for being the cause of his missed interview. Aaron waved it off in the awkward way of someone trying to keep a dignity that hasn't been restored yet. He left the meeting with an envelope and a hand pressed low on the small of his back, an unspoken encouragement. Outside, the light on the avenue seemed gentler, as if the city had adjusted to accommodate another story. For a moment, Aaron walked slower, feeling both the weight and the lift of what had just happened. He had missed the chance he'd been sure would change everything. He had lost one door, but another one had opened, not because fate had rewarded him, but because someone with power noticed the man who had chosen to act when it would have been easier to walk away. On the bus home that evening, he unfolded the offer and read the clauses with the care of someone who has learned to parse small promises. It wasn't an instant cure, no lottery ticket. It was a professional start, practical and plausible. He thought about the bench on Weston Avenue where time had slipped by as he waited for the girl to blink awake, about the weeks of fatigue and the resilience that had carried him through them. He didn't feel vindicated so much as acknowledged, seen in a way that mattered. There are moments when choices feel like calculated sacrifices, and there are moments when they are simply what a person does. Aaron had chosen to help because he could not ignore a human who needed water and shade and steadiness. The consequence had been immediate and tangible: an interview missed, months of small payments that tasted like survival. The consequence had also led, in time, to a door that opened to someone who valued the same thing he had acted on. He walked forward with the new title of assistant coordinator echoing in his head, knowing he would have to earn the trust that had been given, but less afraid now of nights filled with unanswered bills. If you find yourself standing at a crosswalk where the city moves faster than compassion, what would you do?
Aaron chose the slower, more difficult thing and found not an easy reward, but an opportunity that respected his character. Maybe that's as close to justice as any of us get. Not certainty, but a chance to keep going with a steadier step. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done in Aaron's place? And if this story moved you, subscribe for more tales of choices that change lives.